Hello, entrepreneurs. Good evening. Hello, Vincent. We are live.
Hi.
Hello. Thanks for joining the show. We're
my
now
pleasure to
live
be
on. Great. Live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube if everything goes as planned.
Well, it's called Meta nowadays, right? Like that's the.
Sorry,
I'm not blaming you. I will gladly still call it Facebook, but I believe it's called Meta. That's my
I
understanding.
saw the name is really changed already, also in the stock exchange.
Go to Facebook.com. I wonder if it's changed now as well. Oh, it's still called. Okay, Facebook.com still works. All right.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Anyway,
people get,
I'm not here to talk
panicky.
about. I'm not here to talk about Facebook.
Oh, we can. There can also be bots.
We certainly support.
Run on Facebook.
Yeah, and Rasa certainly supports Facebook as a channel. It's certainly true.
Cool.
Certainly
Yeah,
true.
we cannot leave it out yet in the world. To get things started, I always ask the viewers, please let us know in the comments where you are watching from. So not which platform, but which country/city. Last time I forgot to set the context on this question. And I already asked in the LinkedIn chat, but we are also interested, of course, to know if you already use Rasa or you're a complete newbie. For both categories, we'll have some awesome content. I'm pretty sure of that. Small talk is important, of course. So let's quickly continue in that direction, and then we can really start. I noticed when I look back, I had a lot of Dutch guests. It's not, I don't want to discriminate. I have a German guest next show, but you're living in Haarlem, right?
Yep.
In the Netherlands. It looks like winter already came here, and we skipped autumn. But I kind of like it.
So we're going to do the most Dutch thing ever. Is we're going to first talk about the weather for a bit. I mean, today was pretty good here. Like we had. So I don't know where do you live? Do you live in next to the ocean as well, or?
Yeah, Amstelveen.
So we did have a really this. I think the coolest thing about the Netherlands just the mornings when it's really misty and the sun is shining. Like we totally had that here. Like you could see the dew glow through the trees and everything. So like, yeah, it's a little bit cold, but if the sun is out and it's cold outside, Holland's just awesome, just in terms of climate, weather, and nature and stuff. Like I really like it.
I wouldn't want to live in a country without seasons. Let's put it that way.
Definitely.
And, it's nice if it's a bit chilly. You get
and the ice skating. Let's be honest, ice skating. Yeah. Like if we get to do ice skating, every Dutch person kind of goes like, this is why I'm Dutch. We can go ice skating. Paintings and all that.
I'm also checking the socials. Everything looks good, and already a couple of questions coming in the chat. So Rasa, I think every story about conversational companies are quite exciting because a lot of things are happening at an always increasing pace. And of course, it's great that it's a global topic. We have people from Netherlands, of course, Vancouver, Canada, India, Israel, all over the place.
From Vancouver to Vinkeveen.
Yeah, Ukraine, Kiev, Long Island, New York. It's almost too much. Italy, US, Nairobi. It's almost too much to read it all. Belgrado, Serbia. Great. So, I forgot one important small talk question. Do you choose Star Wars or Star Trek?
I guess I'm more of a Star Wars kind of a person, but it's the household that I was raised in. We never my dad kind of always said like, you got to watch this Star Wars thing, and we never really bothered with Star Trek. And then when I came out of college, I was actually kind of aware that Star Trek was even a thing. Looking at it, I think I would have liked Star Trek when I was a bit younger.
But now it's hard to switch.
Well, I mean, the wife has the remote control to Netflix too, and if she doesn't want to watch Star Trek, it's fine. We just got to watch something together. yeah, that's that's kind of the story. In the end, I'm a little bit more Star Wars. It's still kind of a fairy tale, but kind of Star Wars, I guess. If I have to.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I didn't get it from racing, not from my parents, but I handed over the legacy to my son when he was 8, 9, and yeah, we watch everything together now. So that's quite awesome. Okie dokie. Yeah, Rasa, open source conversational AI. Of course, everybody knows kind of what open source means, but yeah, I also want to hear from you what it means within Rasa, how the community,
Sure.
delivers and helps making a great product. Maybe you can introduce Rasa a bit.
Yeah. So the way I can, first of all, hi, I'm Vincent. I actually work for Rasa, so feel free to like keep that in mind as I explain why I think Rasa's great. But one thing I really think is really great about Rasa is because it's open source, you don't need anyone's permission to make a change that works for you. And one of the themes that I think is good to talk about is a lot of natural language processing papers and articles, and a lot of work is actually done in getting conversational AI to work for English. But of course, we would really like it if chatbots work in every language out there. So it might very well be possible. Let's say you're great at Arabic natural language processing. It'd be great if we can just plug in whatever tool works for you into Rasa. And Arabic, I think, is an interesting example because Arabic is not written from left to right; it's written from right to left. Mm-hmm. So it's very well possible that the algorithm that works well in English, the one that assumes everything's written from left to right, doesn't work for Arabic. And the same goes for Chinese and for lots of these languages. And what I think is just great about Rasa is that you don't need to ask anyone's permission just to build on top of what we have. We're all writing stuff in Python. So if you have something that works in Python, you also have something that works or could work on Rasa. And that just opens up, the floor to tons and tons of cool projects and things that you could do. And that's why Rasa exists. Like, we want to make sure there's an open source chatbot toolkit that you could go ahead and use. But another cool thing is also that if someone ends up making a really cool tool for, let's say, Chinese, then they can also choose to open source that. And suddenly Rasa is also more compatible for Chinese users. We have a community member who's been making great tools for Chinese, Rasa_Chinese. You can find it on GitHub. And again, you can only get there if you have an open source platform like Rasa. So that's what we do.
Great. So yeah, you guys offer all kinds of components indeed for spelling mistake handling.
Oh, we don't do that actually. we have a lot of components, but we let's talk about spelling in a bit, because spelling is actually a super hard problem to get right in chatbot land. But spelling is actually one of the tools we don't natively provide. But we have systems that can detect entities like dates and stuff. We definitely have systems that tend to work well. We integrate with Spacey and some of these other tools. So we definitely try to support a whole lot of stuff. We also support like Facebook, if that's an output channel, WhatsApp. I think Twitch was also something that was written by one of our community members. So tons of output channels, if that's your thing. But we basically try to be the engine, if you will, to make all the other things possible. We also have labeling tools and deployment tools if you're in the enterprise, if that's something that you're interested in. But Rasa, the open source core, that only works if it's open source. That's what we believe, at least, is how you want to have that.
Right. Yeah, date labeling is the basis of conversational, I believe. But maybe you can dive a little bit more in that later. So we have a very mixed crowd. I saw conversation designers, NLP gurus, all sorts of people. But yeah, maybe you can briefly take us through how does it work when you want to design a conversation at Rasa? Is it all code based or is it hybrid? Or you have something cool there.
I have code on my machine I could show you if you really want to, but the short story of it is, if you're really starting out in Rasa, you get a couple of files just on your hard drive, so to say. One file contains training data, the other file contains configuration for your machine learning model. But if we really just look at the basics, it's basically just a couple of text files. One text file is basically for your data, so you can imagine things like, here's like 15 examples of how my users might want to do greeting, and here's 10 examples of saying goodbye, and here's like a couple of FAQ questions, and here's examples for each question. That's basically the basis, and from there you can make conversations, because let's say that we have 15 examples of saying hello.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I can make a story with Lego bricks, so to say. So I say, okay, you can say hello, then the bot is supposed to say hello back. Maybe the bot's supposed to reply with something else, but you basically have examples of an intent, which you can use as Lego bricks to construct a conversation, which then gives you two files. One file is with text examples, the other one is with story examples, and that's basically the training data for Rasa. So we then say, we're going to use the text examples to predict the intent, and then we're going to use the sequence of Lego bricks to predict the next action in the story. And those are the two big machine learning systems that Rasa provides. One to sort of predict what does the user want right now, and another system that predicts what's the next action that the bot should take.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's, there's no graphical component there, or is there something on top of it?
So this is Rasa open source that I'm talking about. If you want to have something that's a bit more graphical, we have this tool called Rasa X. So Rasa open source is the really core open source component.
Mm-hmm.
Rasa X is a free tool. It's not open source, but it is free. And that has more of a graphical user interface if you like to do your labeling. It also has more of a click to deploy button, if you will. That's what we call Rasa X. And then there are clients of ours, like the more enterprise users who have some enterprise demands. And for them, we also have this Rasa X Enterprise to sort of suit those needs. And that's also one of the products that sort of earns us money as well. But the Rasa open source, it can just live on your own laptop. Rasa X can be the service on top that actually gives you the user interface.
Right, great. Yeah, when you Google on Rasa, Google also suggests, how does Rasa make money? Because people think open source equals for free. But
I mean, it in a way it does, right? I mean, it's part of our strategy, so to say. But it's kind of like if I were to compare it with another tool, you might have heard of Elasticsearch. It's this company that made the technology that basically powers the search bar for Wikipedia. If I remember that correctly, I think Wikipedia is one of their clients, and it has an open source version. And if you want to maintain that yourself, that's perfectly fine. But there are a couple of features that people might be willing to pay for, and that's kind of the balance that Elasticsearch has made. And similarly, Rasa also does something like that. We really think that if we make it closed source, we're not going to get the contributions that we like. We also won't be able to support every single language out there. So there's definitely a strategic choice there to make it open source. But we do have a couple of extra enterprise features. So that also the money comes in, so to say. But the money is mainly made with Rasa X Enterprise.
Right, cool. That's clear. Yeah, and a great business model, right? I think Rasa is doing great and growing like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we to be fair, like we are VC backed, right? So we have investors, and that's also part of what causes us to grow. But I believe I saw an email today that I have 8 new colleagues this week. So yeah, we're definitely in a growth spurt. You can definitely, I can confirm that.
Yeah, I think the whole ecosystem is, of course, expanding quite well. So
yeah. So it's kind of, those Gartner charts where they sort of see like this is the ecosystem of chatbot land, and then you see all the different there's like 80 companies. Like I was actually kind of surprised by that, but there's like 80 companies who have some form of service that provides people with chatbots, which is kind of a mind-boggling number. Most of them aren't open source though. Like that's kind of the unique thing about Rasa. It's also kind of our unique selling point. It makes it easy to customize. If you have a mature IT organization, then suddenly Rasa becomes interesting because it's relatively easy to basically customize it, bend it in the way that you want it precisely.
Exactly, but that 80 companies are those who service enterprise. Right?
It's
because the whole landscape is much bigger.
No, that's definitely true.
Pretty sure of it.
And and I'm pretty sure there's probably a company out there that makes chatbots for dentists, like just to like a.
Exactly.
That's probably not the enterprise solution. No, you're right. But it's definitely a lot of people are working on the problem. So there's also like we are in contact with some universities as well. There's we have interns as well who want to sort of write their thesis about a tool that you can hook up with Rasa. So there's lots of collaborations in that sense. But the main thing that I find interesting is because we're one of the few open source solutions out there, we do get a specific kind of attention that's just very interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, when we prepared this interview, well, prior to that, I listened to some podcasts of Rasa, and I also heard you talk about one topic was that you created more for fun an escape room bot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was thinking maybe you can take us through the process and the difficulties and the challenges when designing something like that, and especially on Rasa.
Yeah, so the way that ball got rolling is it helps to explain a little bit what my role at Rasa is. So I do a little bit of research, but I'm also here to sort of do education. That's also part of what I do. So I was talking to my boss, like, wouldn't it be kind of fun if I just made a chatbot that's kind of fun and interesting, and I just document what it's like to make it. And then my boss said, Vincent, that sounds fun, but like, yeah, you got to do something special then. Like, don't make a random joke bot. Like, do something that's kind of unique. Yeah. So I obviously went for the hardest thing I could think of, and I was like, I should make a text-based adventure game that'll work with Rasa. And then my boss went like, all right, Vincent, but text-based adventure game is a lot of work. You might want to tone it down a bit. So then we kind of came to this idea of a escape room, because it's kind of like a text-based adventure game, but it's all stuck in a single room, which also means that you can make it as complex or as hard as you'd like it to be. And then, that's pretty interesting, because you can start out with a very simple breakout bot. So the way that I started thinking about it, like, what are the tools inside of Rasa that I can use? And okay, well, we have intents. Like, in a single message, you can declare, I want to look at the window, or I want to try to pick up the window, or I want to, you can have an intent saying look, and then you can have an entity, which in this case will be the window. So, okay, I have a system that says, look at something, pick up something. We can have examples for that, and then intent is done. Then we have the entities, which I can also declare up front. Then Rasa actually has this mechanic called slots. So an entity is something that you declare in a single message. So for example, in the pizza bot scenario, that would be, I want to buy a margarita pizza.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want the bot to remember that for the next conversational turn, then we store it into something that we like to call a slot. It's a long-term memory. So then I thought, okay, that could be the inventory system. If you pick an item up, then that's your inventory. There you go. So I came up with like a really, really silly first room example, basically. If I recall correctly, there's a window, you're in the building, you cannot jump out of the window, the door's locked, and you got to find the key, and the key's hidden under a box. Like, that's the simple thing. And then, I made the very, very first version. But then, of course, I made the version, and I didn't show it to any of my colleagues yet. So what I then did is I kind of just said, look, I'm just going to put that thing live inside of Rasa X. Like, there's a nice little button there that allows you to say, share this with the users. And then, I can host it and have people play with it. And then I realized that most of my colleagues never played a text-based adventure game before. So they were super duper confused. And I could tell from the logs that they didn't get it. One of the funnier things was I actually had this one colleague who never really played a video game before, but her boyfriend did. And whenever she saw her boyfriend play a video game, genuinely, I'm not making fun of her or anything. This is literally what she thought.
I believe
well, but she thought, like, whenever my boyfriend is playing a video game, he's usually like breaking everything with a gun. So maybe that's what I should do in this text-based adventure game. Like, that was her natural response. Like, oh, it's a video game. So she basically started typing, like, can I destroy the box? Or can I kill the window? Like, but of course, this is great feedback, because basically you've got the machine learning part of making an assistant. Then there's also the user interface, how to get people to actually use it. And then you kind of learn, like, okay, we should add like an explainer on top that sort of explains how the game should be played. And also we should make it very clear, like, these are the actions you can do, these are the actions you cannot do. Mm-hmm. And then we also learn, like, it might be good to have a hint system in this mini game, so that people who don't get it get a little bit of a hint. And if they ask for a hint 3 times in a row, they get the solution, that kind of stuff. So that's how far I basically got. It was pretty interesting. It also kind of shows that making an assistant is definitely more about doing the design well than it is about the machine learning per se. But then I also kind of learned after making like 4 seasons of this, that although a lot of people thought it was pretty cool what I was doing, that it wasn't necessarily a example of an assistant that many people were inclined to copy. So I think I made in total like 30 videos or something where I explained the process. But since then, I've moved on to other demos. But this was one of the demos that I was working on back then. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's indeed pretty complex to start with. Yeah, great. I'm looking through the chat window we have on the LinkedIn event page. So there already were a couple of questions in the past days. So I thought let's not forget about those people because they asked first.
Well,
right. So
very
Oliver,
good.
they asked, what processes or best practices do you follow for developing stories and rules, and how do you troubleshoot when they don't behave as you expected?
So the main thing that I'm always a little bit afraid of is I can optimize a system, but it's really scary when I optimize a system in a way that doesn't necessarily help my users. Like that's always kind of the hard part. It's very easy to optimize. It's very hard to know what you're optimizing toward, what you should be optimizing towards. So that's kind of the key part that I usually try to focus on. Whenever I have an assistant that I think is ready, the first thing that I try to do is just show it to a colleague and immediately sort of get it to break it. Like I want to know where the unintuitive parts are. And really that's about it. It's basically showing it to more users, learning from it, trying to make it better. Part of that is labeling. Like sometimes turns out there are lots of ways of saying hello. So the number one example that people typically forget is yo. So and it confuses machine learning systems because yo is like a very short word and a couple of annoying things about it. But that, like, part of it is labeling, but another part is also hey, maybe there's some frequently asked questions that we have missed that people are asking us all the time, and how can we get that iteration cycle to be as short as possible? Like that's more sort of the approach that I would take.
Yeah, exactly.
And at Rasa we have an abbreviation for it. We call it CDD, conversation driven development. Basically, this whole process of you're listening to your users as you're improving your assistant, and do that on repeat. That's basically the best approach that we've advised people to follow.
But when your bot has a high number of users, you get a lot of data in, of course, and then you want to quantify, like, what should we focus on first, and what should we do next?
Yeah,
is
so
there
also
some automation there in
some.
Rasa?
So I should say, like, this is an active area of research. Part of the trick here is to sort of say, well, let's first go for the examples that the machine learning algorithm finds the most confusing. Sensible to check some of those first. Another thing, and there's a couple of tricks around that. Like, there's also, do we have an intent that just doesn't have a lot of examples yet? Okay, if not, then those need to go in first. And there's also these moments where the machine learning algorithm was really confident about it, but still got it wrong.
False positive.
But a really, really false positive. Like if the machine learning algorithm says, I'm super sure, but got it wrong, okay, then we need to correct it.
Yeah.
So those are kind of tools that we do provide, some of which are already in Rasa X. It should be said that this is an active area of research. But definitely, if people have more technical questions about that, ask away, because it's actually something that I'm researching at the moment. But definitely, we try to help users as much as possible. But I should stress, you do need to just look at the logs yourself sometimes.
Yeah. You have to go to the
just
granular level.
Well, so it really helps to understand the user, like what steps has the user tried to do, but why did it still not help? So one of the things that you could maybe also do is just, how often in the flow of a conversation, you have like a form, for example. Something that I also like to look for is, suppose that a form had like 16 turns, but still no value got filled in for some reason. Then either we're talking about a user who doesn't know how to escape the form and is starting to curse at some point. But whenever form values don't get filled in, that's also a really interesting moment to just start paying attention.
Yeah, then something derails somehow.
Yes, no, and sometimes that's qualitative, not necessarily quantitative. That's kind of the interesting thing about chat logs.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Let me scroll down a bit. Yeah, I got some people who say I'm already using it. It's really amazing. So that's nice to hear, of course.
Thanks.
I like the fact that I can change the pipelines to customize my bot more. Yeah, I have a follow-up question, by the way, about about
go ahead.
gap analysis, because which intents don't you have yet, and are your users demanding? So we watched the demo at my current client of humanfirst.ai, and they have some pretty impressive stuff. Of course, all demos are impressive, but I noticed that quite some of the other players as well kind of leave a gap in this automated gap analysis. So I think that's something I see happening more, and other players jump in that.
So part of what, so a colleague of mine, Dutch, had a really cool feature. We launched that in Rasa 2. I want to say 6, might have been 2.7. We call it the unexpected intent classifier, unexpected intent policy. Sorry. The idea is whenever Rasa sees an intent and really, really got it wrong, like we did not expect a user to say this at that point in this conversation, then we mark it. Basically to tell the user, like, something about what the user said there is just really, really confusing. The user should just, like, someone needs to label that just to make sure what's happening there. Now, of course, the hard part is how do you tune this exactly? Like, suppose that we get, even after doing this after a week, you still have thousands of examples. Okay, how can we sort those examples such that the 10 examples on top are the ones that the user really has to label for sure? That's still an active area of research, but definitely more algorithms like this are going to get rolled out also by our end. A thing that I'm currently working on is a system that can detect when a user has accidentally labeled something wrong. Because that's also something that can happen. If you have 10 people who label, odds are they're not going to perfectly label in sync. So how can you maybe detect examples that may have been wrongly labeled?
Yeah, exactly.
It's also an area of interest.
Yeah, there's so many interesting aspects about conversational. It's pretty awesome. Cool. Stein gives a compliment to the dog on the background, by the way.
That's Husky.
Yeah, he's a good dog.
Yeah, good doggy.
Stein also asked, how is it best to see Rasa? Is it like a scripted bot environment with intents and entities, or a bot ecosystem, or is it another kind of more applicable description?
So in the base form, you could say it is scripted in the sense that we don't generate text to send back to the user. You might have heard of GPT-3 and systems like that. Although what they've done is to some extent quite impressive. There is, text that it generates can also be racist and like horrible gibberish, basically. So to prevent that, Rasa, base Rasa basically says you can have custom variations in what you respond back, but we don't generate it. Like everything that the bot says has been written by a human before, therefore we can guarantee that nothing bad is being sent back. So in that sense, you could argue it's scripted because that's known up front. It's not necessarily scripted because in the end, it is machine learning that is doing all of this. We don't have a state machine or if-else statements that are being applied. It is general in the sense that machine learning systems are trying to generalize what to do next. Now, in terms of it being an ecosystem, we do like it if we can do a little bit of plug and play. So if there is a very popular social media platform in, I don't know, New Zealand that isn't Facebook, but we still want to have that as an output channel, let's say, then people are free to sort of write their own little plugin. And in that sense, we have accumulated quite a few plugins. Some of them are for non-English languages, others are for output channels. So in that sense, you could call it an ecosystem. But I think I prefer plugin ecosystem in that sense, because immediately it's more clear that it's about plugging into Rasa as opposed to there being an ecosystem beyond virtual assistants that Rasa is in. And to give another example, Spacey is this really popular machine learning framework for text in Python. That's one of the things that you can plug into Rasa. But it's not like Rasa and Spacey are in a giant ecosystem. I mean, you could say, yeah, they're both NLP, but they are still kind of different projects. Spacey is more about general text analysis. Rasa is more about specific chatbot instances. So ecosystem, I guess you could call it that, but I do want to be a little bit distinct.
Yeah, but when you mention the huge amount of plugins, that's also where the power of open source comes into play, of course.
Definitely.
Cool. Alexander asks, how is it going with Rasa's experimental feature called end-to-end training. What are the biggest challenges with it right now?
It might help to explain what that feature does.
Yeah, let's
and I think
start
so there's a language is really, really interesting. So if I tell you good afternoon, and you had to guess the intent, what would you guess?
welcome intent.
Yeah, or hello, or something, greeting, or
Yeah.
that's some, yeah. The weird thing about good afternoon is if you say it at the end of the conversation,
It's goodbye.
then it means goodbye. And this is really painful because this is the same text that can be part of two intents, and those two intents are opposites of each other in meaning.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's horribly painful, especially because it's also two intents that most chatbots have, right? So that's a bummer. But you got to accept that this is language. Like, language lives in context. So the end-to-end feature that's being referred to here is, as Rasa, we do accept the fact that not every utterance fits an intent. That's not how language works. So we want to have a system that's able to say, well, maybe the text that I have here doesn't really fit any of these intents, but in the context of this conversation, the bot still knows that this is the next best action. That's what end-to-end is kind of all about. And another common example that we have for this is, suppose an assistant were to say, hey, you, would you like to have sushi? And if you say, I had that yesterday, then in the context of this conversation, I had that yesterday means no. However, I would not like it if I see I had that yesterday as an example for the deny intent. Like, that wouldn't work.
No.
But we do want to have a system that's able to do that. So the way that we do this is we have features from the system that predicts the intent. And those features are now also passed on to the system that says, that predicts the next action. That's how that works. Now, what are some of the challenges? Part of it is compute time. So we are sending way more data to one of our learning systems. So it's no surprise that the training times are longer, and the computation on its own is just a bit more heavy. Another issue kind of is just the benchmarking of it. Typically, you will have more data with intents than that you will have stories with these exceptions in them. So it's kind of hard to benchmark when you don't have a huge amount of data as well. So that's also kind of a challenge. What we are doing in the next iteration of Rasa is we are introducing this new computational backend that should allow you to customize this just a little bit more. And hopefully this will also make it easier for our research team to properly do the benchmarks. One thing I can confirm, though, is that end-to-end is, as far as I'm looking at it, it's a really required feature. So it's definitely not going away.
No, it's being more advanced as we speak. So
yes, an active area of work.
Cool,
for sure.
Cool. Yeah, Oliver gives a follow-up on this first question because we kind of got the wrong context there. But he said my question was more in relation to troubleshooting stories and understanding how the policies and the rules are interacting.
What was the original question again?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm processing a lot here.
No worries.
And by the way, somebody also mentioned Battlestar Galactica as an alternative for Star Wars and Star Trek. But I found it in the meantime. The original question was, what processes or best practices do you follow for developing stories and rules, and how do you troubleshoot when they don't behave as expected?
Right. So it's a bit, I would still argue the main thing you want to focus in on are your end users, like the data that is being generated by actual end users. That's the thing I would, consider most. And then how far do you really want to go into debugging? Inside of Rasa, there is this thing, there's a command line app called Rasa Interactive. And what you're able to do there is you're basically able to say, okay, let's take the train system that I have and step for step, let's just redo the conversation. And then it will also be able to tell you, okay, this decision was made because this was the intent and these were the slots that were currently set. That's kind of the way that I like to think about it, step by step, just where is the decision being made? And then typically what I can also do is just sort of look at the logs and say, right, rule policy was sort of picking that one up. It shouldn't have picked that one. Let's fix that in the config. But that's my current approach. I wouldn't mind having a bit more time to sort of make more of a user interface for this. Mm-hmm. But getting that right is a bunch of research. But if you have ideas about that, reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Odds are that I will have time next quarter to maybe make a Streamlit app as a demo. because it's been on my mind that we might want to have something that's a bit more graphical there.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, so this should answer Oliver's question. Yeah, we kind of touch labeling as well. So
I do want to mention
labeling.
I do want to mention it a little bit. So two things, right? So automated labeling is a little bit scary because I want to trust the label, period. And if someone says automated labeling, then maybe I got to worry about bad labels.
Maybe augmented then.
Yeah, so that becomes the concern. That said, there are like two tricks that I do want to admit to. So in terms of automated labeling, there is this trick that I'm currently working on that's related to spelling. So I know a lot of people who like to use a spell checker in their virtual assistant, and I get the idea because hopefully if a user makes a typo, you might be able to correct that, and then that might resemble your training data better, and then therefore your predictions might be better. The idea behind that is pretty good. Except for the fact that if users have like 3 words, it becomes really tricky to guarantee that the spell checker doesn't make a mistake. So what I am now trying out, and it seems to work, is I'm basically saying, let's just take your normal training data. And because I know the layout of a keyboard, I know that if you're trying to press K, the odds of you accidentally pressing L are a little bit bigger than you accidentally pressing S, right?
Exactly.
So we can simulate typos. So what we could go ahead and do is just double our training size. We just have the clean data without spelling errors. And now we have the same data with spelling errors. And we know the labels because we just copy the labels along. And now you have twice as much data. And if you train on both of those data sets, then you're probably more robust against spelling errors. I've done some benchmarks and it seems rather promising. The only downside is that you doubled your training size, so training times will also increase. And because there are lots of more combinations of letters in there, it might be more than double. Like you might actually get a significant training time increase because of this. Still working. I'm trying to figure out if I can get a good solution to that. But this is an example of automated labeling by merit of doing this sort of spelling trick. Another thing that you could also do, if you go to YouTube and you type Vincent bulk labeling, you'll see a demo of me where basically what I'm doing is I'm using a visualization trick. It's a lot of math, and I kind of don't want to bore this audience with that. But what you can basically do is you can use these word embeddings that are like high-dimensional vectors of words, and you can do that for sentences. And what you can then do is you can say, well, let's just use principal component analysis or UMAP or whatever other trick to sort of take those 300 dimensions and turn them into 2. And then you get these clusters of sentences. So what I really like to do when I have a new data set, and I know that there's intents in there, is I like to throw that into this mathematical bucket script that I have. Then I got a 2-dimensional cluster script. And then I've made this tool called Human Learn that allows me to just swipe select and assign one label to an entire cluster. This gives me a bronze label. It's not a gold label, but it is a good starting point to sort of explore a data set. This is also active research. I do want to mention it's fairly experimental, but I do know teams have been using this technique with success.
Yeah, but that's the cool part about your job at Rasa, right? You have the time to. Yeah, you don't have enough time because there's so many.
Well, I don't want to pretend like I've got enough time for all the things I want to be doing.
But to get back on these spelling errors, because I know some platforms advise their users to not include spelling errors in, for example, training utterances.
Yeah,
that might be different, right? Platform to platform.
So I would. So it depends a little bit, but let's take a step back. So typos, right? They are a specific kind of spelling error. Yeah. You also have phonetic errors. So if you go to Marktplaats, I believe there's 10 legitimate ways to spell barbecue at this phase. Like I think just
exactly. Dutch, English, and the wrong ones.
Yeah. So phonetically, you can imagine there's tons of mistakes that are being made there. Now, the thing is, what I want to do is I want to make an assistant that is really good at understanding my users. And if my users consistently make the same spelling error, then I could argue that's a reason to actually put it in your training data. Because in the end, the only thing I really care about is that my end users are well understood by my assistant. That said, I do want to be a little bit careful with this trick that I've mentioned here, because I'm not going to be able to simulate every single spelling error out there. No. Right, so there definitely is a bit of a balance here. But if I am, so another good example of this is, let's say you're Belgian. On paper, that's still kind of Dutch. Like if you look at word embedding libraries, you're still going to get the Dutch one. But if you're Belgian, there's going to be some words in there that, as far as the Dutch proper language is concerned, in the Netherlands aren't really real words. But I would argue that I would still want to have that in my vocabulary
Right.
if I'm targeting the Belgian audience. Like, that, it's a no-brainer. Just do it.
Exactly. And even some words mean something completely different in
Yeah, yeah.
Flemish. Then you can go quite wrong there, painfully.
Yeah, so but it's simple stuff as well. So like in Dutch, if you want to go to like the snack bar to get fries, you would just say, oh, just get frietent. But in Belgium, they would say frietkot. And if a Belgian in Amsterdam would say, hey, where's your nearest frietkot? I mean, nobody would understand you. But it is normal to add frietkot to your vocabulary if you are making a chatbot for snack bars. Like that's that. But again, try it out in real life as well. Like your users are your main source of truth here. That's the main thing to keep in mind.
Exactly. Thanks. Great. I just put the next one in here. It's like magic. So Leszek asks, I've got 2 questions. Do you know of any Rasa deployments in phone channels, like call steering, outbound calls?
Good one. So I'm not sure. I do know that we have a Twilio integration. So you can Google it and you can find the demos where the idea is you do speech to text via Twilio that goes into Rasa. Rasa sends text back and that's being sent forward. Like, I definitely have the demo there. I can show you the code. I don't know who has that deployed though, to be honest. We do have like a little front page on our website with like a list, but to my knowledge, I wouldn't know. I would double check there.
T-Mobile,
because those are the public ones that I can talk about. So I don't know whether or not there's a Twilio deployment there, but I do know that we support Twilio. Yeah,
exactly. And I think also a lot of stuff is going on there in the call center. Automation.
One thing that is that I do want to mention about call center automation. So far, the demos that I've seen from like speech to text, there's some impressive stuff out there, but it typically tends to work well if it's in a low noise environment. So call center is different than person on the street, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also dialects. That's still kind of a challenging area. So even if you have something that really understands Dutch quite well, I'm from Brabant. I know that I cannot do the Eindhoven voice if I want that automated bot to understand me. Like we're still not there yet.
No, it's just so much. In our small little country, there are like more than a dozen dialects.
Well, yeah. So we have 2 official languages. Fries is the language,
yes.
It's official, and then we have Brabants, Limburgs, Twents, Zeeuws.
Yeah.
And I'm also willing to go on record by saying that Amsterdam and Rotterdam and The Hague, that they somehow managed to have like their own dialect within the city,
and they're proud of it.
Yeah, and they don't mind mentioning it to you. Yeah. But dialects in general, especially with the speech stuff, is still a hard problem, I think. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So another question from Leszek. If there's no state machine, is there a way to implement a state such as user identification verification that would be essential to go through with the rest of the conversation? And breathe in.
Yeah.
The one breath rule, right?
Yeah. So you don't need a state machine to store state. So as I mentioned earlier, we have this idea of I want to buy a pizza margarita. Pizza margarita can then be saved, and this can still change the behavior in other steps in the conversation, but you don't need a state machine for that. When you think of a state machine, you kind of think for every possible state out there, I've got an arrow going out, going into another box. In Rasa, it's more like, hey, this is currently the state. This is what the user just said. Machine learning algorithm use those 2 things as input to predict what we should do next. That's kind of the approach of Rasa.
So it's way more dynamic than in that sense.
Yes. And also you have to define less upfront. State machines are a neat idea if the state is small, but the moment it gets big, it's just
right.
Yeah.
Yes, that says bulk labeling is incredible. So yeah, people are enthusiastic.
There's more to look out for in that realm, so keep your eyes peeled.
Exactly. Let me hide this one. Ali Lohmani, a friend of the Botpreneurs for a long time. There's always great content. When is Rasa going to release agent in the loop, so intent conflict resolution or deep context intent classification can be done in a more graceful manner? I hope you understand this question.
Well, so it depends a little bit on what is meant with agent in the loop. Are we talking about like, hey, when a user says, I want to talk to a human, that we then proxy them forward, or is agent in the loop referring to something else? So if it's the former, in that sense, well, we have custom actions, as we like to call them, which is basically a custom Python function that you could call, and we have documented tricks to sort of use that to say, okay, this conversation's over. I want to now move on to a human, and you will have to make a bit of an integration with your backend there, but it's certainly possible. Clients have done that in the past, and I think the financial demo that we have on GitHub also has this feature implemented as an example. So that's definitely a use case that we allow. If it's in the loop, then that suggests almost as if the assistant is around helping the agent.
Like giving possible answers the agent could give to the client.
Yeah. So
that's also, of course, a nice feature of conversational AI.
Yeah. So you would have to do the integration a little bit yourself, because technically the user says something, this has to go to the assistant needs to make the prediction, but then that prediction should not go back to the user, but to you. And then when you actually pick the action, this has to go back to the assistant and then back to so there is some integration work you would have to do yourself. But I cannot come up with a good reason why it's impossible. The only thing I would say is you do have to do a little bit of integration there with your own system.
Right. Ali replied that he meant both, so I think then we covered it, right?
Then we covered it, yeah.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, what I'm also hearing more about on LinkedIn, of course, mostly is intentless conversational AI. So more based on on a knowledge graph, and I think this is a really interesting topic. My background is in business intelligence, so I made entity relation diagrams a lot. And it's funny to now see it return in this area.
There's a couple of ideas that I've got in that realm. So part of the thing that I think is going to be interesting is how easy is it to turn natural text into a SQL query? There's something about that is actually kind of interesting, because if you're able to do that, then you can do stuff like, hey, give me the summary of X over Y and show me the chart that shows X. There's some stuff that's pretty interesting there. And I have seen some demos kind of this, but usually they're really limited to this one table. If you think about all the different types of things that could be in columns, and if you think of all the different types of queries that people could be asking, the general problem is still kind of tricky. But we are getting quite close to just having a single table be queryable, but that's getting within reach. And if that's getting within reach, then probably graph databases also will be available for that soon. Spacey, the project, is also investing in this. Like if you just look at the people they hire, they seem to be hiring lots of people who are building Spacey plugins exactly around this space. So there's definitely interesting things happening there. The only downside of that is it's great to have a knowledge graph, but you also need to maintain one. So let's say the knowledge graph is, I don't know, you're the Dutch BBC, then it is going to suck if your metadata has like old, like bad dates in it, the actor's name is spelled wrong. Like that has to be really sort of in order, because it's going to be shown to the user directly all of a sudden. That's still part of the challenge here. And especially if you're a larger enterprise, I wouldn't discount that this is a thing to actually be concerned with. Because there is now a risk that you might be sending wrong information to the user if your table is not up to scratch, right? Like that's an extra concern now.
Right. And I know there are also players on the market that can, or they claim they can, I believe them, they can scrape your company website and there, create largely automatically the graph itself, and then put conversational AI on top of that. But maybe a hybrid form is also interesting, of course.
Well, so another thing that I know that people are researching this. So one thing that I've seen, one thing I've seen demos of, and the reason I've seen a demo is because, again, someone just made a plugin, is the idea of, so in data science, we have this thing called confidence. It's usually the output of a machine learning algorithm is this class with a number between 0 and 1 that tries to be the probability. It's not actually the probability, but it's like a probability. But you could interpret that as a measure for confidence. And you could say, look, the most confident intent that I have is greeting, but I only have 10% confidence in that. Then we might be able to say, okay, let's just take what the user said and throw it into a search database and just get like documents that like, this might just be a frequently asked question. And let's just see in our database if this matches any of the thousands of questions that we have had in the past. And if it does, then we just fetch the top 3 and ask the user, hey, just to check, is this what you were interested in? Right. And I do see lots and lots of new companies who are trying to be very good at that one last specific task, that you're just able to have like a neural engine retrieval system, so to say. Yeah. And I can imagine for FAQ kinds of stuff that you may be able to scrape from a website, there's something there that is actually pretty interesting. But the only downside is that what you retrieve, you got to be really sure that that's actually the thing the user's interested in. And yeah, how do we accept it if it's 80% accurate, or do we really want it to be 90% accurate? We still kind of have to discover that. But
it's an interesting fallback system, and you have those low intent scores.
Yeah. So definitely, this is I would argue, good idea on how to deal with fallback mechanisms.
And also the reason I started about it is, that optimizing intent structures with the entities and the training utterances can be a very daunting task, almost impossible for a human to do correctly in a limited amount of time. So I think there's a big challenge for us there.
But I do want to say though, it's a bit of a balance, because one way of also thinking about it, all the human effort that you put in there also gives you certainty, because it's been checked off by a human. Like, okay, this is a good response to that question. I cannot say so. I cannot tell you the name of the company, but I've heard this one example where I think it was like a toy company, and they had like a logo, and the logo was of this sort of cartoon character, and the cartoon character had a name, and the cartoon character often gets questions on the birthday. Okay, so that's fine. So that they figured like, we're gonna make a chatbot, we're gonna allow questions about this little character. So like, what's your last name? When were you born? That kind of thing. Unfortunately, because it was great that they thought of this, but because birthdays includes dates and things surrounding dates, that's actually kind of similar to, hey, when is my package getting here? And it really sucks to sort of when is my package getting here? And then you get this answer about this cartoon character's age. I mean, no, like, you don't want that. But if there's a human in the loop there, they might be able to catch some of this stuff. Like, okay, that question shouldn't end up there.
Yeah.
But if you have this lookup system, you might get stuff like this, right? So yeah, it's going to be daunting to sort of go through every single question. I do agree. But there is something to be said that humans have confirmed, like, look, these are just the 50 top questions and we can answer them perfectly. And let's just focus in on those first before we try to move the heavy tail along, because that might be more risky.
Yeah. And we also face a problem that our customers use 2 different topics. They mix them up. But for us in the process, it are 2 separate processes, but because they mix them up, you cannot know what they mean. So we tried something in NLP, but then we said, maybe just put 2 big buttons. Do you mean option A or option B?
Yeah. And then you get back into the conversational design aspect of it. That's very important. I think at banks, like a common one I can imagine is stuff like, I have a question about my card. Do you mean debit card or credit card? like because those are 2 different people who can answer that question, so to say.
Yeah.
But it also depends on the company. Like, I can imagine if it's a 20A rule kind of a thing. Like, if you have the 50 most frequently asked questions, you can handle those off with an assistant. And that means that 20% of the questions don't need to get handled by a human anymore. That's still a win, right? Like that can be a great starting point. Exactly. But then you do need to know like the actual questions that are being asked the most, which is a moving target, because when Corona hits, questions are going to be super different. And when a new iPhone comes out, it also is going to be super different again.
Yeah, exactly. It's the challenge to stay ahead.
Keep up.
Keep up. Yeah, and Stijn wants to talk to you later about knowledge graphs.
Okay, cool.
Some networking going on already.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm also checking the time, of course. Yeah, the hour is almost over
Upon
already.
us.
Yeah, it flies by when you're having fun, of course. I think, yeah, there are a lot more topics, so maybe we should just repeat this session in, I don't know, half a year or a year.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and sharing your time with us. Yeah, so before we close up, I have some household announcements. The first one is the next Entrepreneurs Live interview is in December, beginning of December, with Sascha Walter. He used to work with Amazon Alexa and later with Cognigy. And he's currently working for the Deutsche Bahn, so the German railways, and is chief advisor UX/conversational. So he is also filled with a lot of knowledge. And also fun, next Tuesday, the first Entrepreneurs Networking online networking event will take place. Got quite some traction there. I think you also signed up on LinkedIn, but we discussed that signing up on LinkedIn is fairly easy. So yeah, let's see who comes, but there will be some great networking opportunities there. And yeah, to summarize it, everything about entrepreneurs and also some great discounts on CDI courses or other stuff can be found on botpreneurs.live. That's the website I ramped up like 6 weeks ago. Also to get some SEO action on this great content we are producing together as a community. Yeah, so thanks viewers for watching and also for the great questions, because it's great to do this dynamic based on the user input. Like it's intended, I think.
Lots of questions.
Yeah,
good
lots
one.
of questions. Yeah, Michelle thanks us both. You're welcome, Michelle. So yeah, let's maybe some more questions come in afterwards, because the videos will be viewable in playback. So we will have a look and we'll make sure you get your answer. So again, Vincent, thanks a lot. And
my pleasure.
Good luck with setting your priorities with all these amazing challenges.
It's never ending, but it's fun stuff. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. Okay, see you later. Bye bye.
Have a good one.